Welcome to the compound layouts video. This is a very much unscripted video where I go over each compound and talk about it as a Rook player, showing you how to build on each point. This is by no means the only way to build on each control point, but these are some general guidelines / things I found to be effective on each control point. In the top left corner, I also rank each control point based on how good Rook can be on it, as well as how good the wall pens are, as well as if there is decent roof access, which is very important in this game. And finally, before the video starts, I have timestamps in the description if you want a specific control point. Anyways, enjoy. Okay, starting with assembly, or also known as Hightower. I call it Hightower because of, well, a pretty obvious reason. Overall, this point is actually very good, primarily because of the roof access that you can access pretty well. Being up here, obviously, high ground being as important as it is, several really good positions. Obviously, primarily this position like here, very good. Obviously, as always, take into account what side the enemy is attacking from and adjust accordingly. These two side buildings are pretty decent. What is really good though is this top building, which you can jump over there, as you can very easily put a palisade here and jump up to the top area, like so. Very easily you can put some palisades in these corners here to make a very extremely defensible position that's very hard to attack from. While they can mine up to, you have the perfect counter towards that, being your Rook Bomb. And be it Volk or Prince or whatever gun you're using, it can be very hard to counter you up here. But at the same time, very easy to escape due to these very large walls on the side here. Overall, this point is very strong for Rook. A few good other spaces you can go are down here in this main building. You can put some barricades on the inside of this building, creating a fairly defensible wall that you could take advantage of. Highly suggest putting a sandbag on this table, primarily due to that sight line. If, for example, someone gets on the roof, just means you can hide a little bit easier. I would not use this building over here. It's just a bit too open and can often just lead to your death due to these really bad angles through for this window here and just the side doors. It's just not as good. Next up is Barracks. For this control point, you really have two options. Your first option is going to be in this building. Pretty simple. Barricade on this side. Barricade on this side. And that's basically it. You put a palisade in the middle here, but that's really all you need to defend this point. It's actually quite effective. Because there's only two entrances, and because these walls are very hard to wall pen, because of these extra boxes, it's very, very defensible. And honestly, being in here is almost impossible to push. So keep that in mind when you get this point. The other option for you is this back building over here. The other two buildings, the roofs are not that good. This one, on the other hand, is actually quite good, as you can jump up here and build some sandbags over here. These provide some incredible defense and is very hard to remove you from. Obviously, the main downside is it depends on what side the enemy is coming from, as if they're coming from this side over here, then this is really kind of unviable. The other buildings, unfortunately, are just not as good due to the weird angles and just not as viable structure. This one is by far the best due to the way it angles and the way you can use sandbags here to have really, really dumb sight lines all the way to the other side. So those are really your two options for Barracks. Okay, next up we have Basin, or Waterworks, as I like to call it. This point's actually not too bad, although the roof, which we'll get to in a second, can make it a little bit difficult to defend at times. The main area I like to go in is this area over here, where I like to put some palisades in this little corridor right here, which can be very good to defend, due to the sight lines that it has across the entire positions. One other spot I often like using is right here, where you can put a sandbag right here to defend this entire angle right here. Very nice for if the enemy is coming from that side specifically. The main issue with this control point and why it's not higher score is primarily the roof. The roof is extremely easy to get to no matter what class you are, and because of that, flanking is super easy, and it can be super hard to counter due to the metal on the roof being unpennable. But at the same time, you can also take advantage of the roof extremely well. Placing sandbags on the top here is extremely effective, as you can defend this whole side, especially if they end up mining up pretty high. Do be careful of drop downs from the ceiling if, for example, they mine up. Next up, we have Bastion. This one is honestly pretty bad for Rook. I would highly suggest not using this if possible. There's a few spots you can build on, but they're not the most effective. The main spot I like to build on is this little box here, specifically these 3 boxes. That side's okay, but this side is much better due to the extra sandbags you get over there. Palisade up here, palisade over here, and palisade over here. This position's actually not too bad. They made a change to this point a while ago where these walls used to be pennable, but you can no longer do that. And it made the point way more unbalanced, to be completely honest. This position's okay, but to be honest, this point's really hard to defend no matter what, especially if you get pushed by players on either side. These hallways, on the other hand, are awful. Straight lines, no cover, and really hard to fight in. You can mitigate that a little bit by putting palisades in them like this, but even then this is not that effective just because of how easy it is to push you. So I end up trying to avoid these hallways as much as possible and trying to get into the center, which is a lot better due to having some natural cover at the very least. In general, though, this point is really hard to fight on and is really hard to defend. Okay, next up we have Church. This is not a bad point, actually. Pretty more in the higher range of how good it can be for Rook. Primarily, though, you want to be focusing on the insides of buildings. There's a few spots you can get up here. For example, you can use a palisade here to get onto the roof pretty quickly. But because there's this area here, which you can get on the roof even easier, it's not the best. So in the end, the roof is super accessible by most classes if they know what they're doing, such as just like that. There's a few other spots that you can get up here, which are kind of important to know for map knowledge. I missed the jump, oops. So you can get up here, and then you can, if you jump correctly, which I did not do there. Here, I'll cut until I fucking get it. There we go. See? Kind of hard to get up here, though, to be honest. Anyways, the main building you're going to be wanting to focus your builds in is this one. Due to the L-shaped nature of it and the walls with pretty weird obstacles, it's very good for defending. I would highly suggest putting a palisade right here. If I destroy them. Putting a palisade right here. Sandbag right here. And so on. You can also put a palisade here, completely blocking off the access to this room, which is actually not too bad. It means that you're a bit more defensible if, for example, they're coming from this side of the point. But if they're coming from this side, then you can also put some barbed wire here, which makes it a bit harder to get in. Overall, this room is actually extremely defensible, and the cache is right there if you need more supplies. So I would highly suggest using this room if possible. Next up, we have Cobble. This point is actually very good for Rook. One of his best, actually, in the top 5. The first area you want to have in mind is this roof access area. There is a way up with this ladder, but using a palisade is much faster. This area right here, where these boxes are, is generally the area I like building in the most, as you can build a palisade here and a sandbag on this side over here. This spot is actually very defensible, although it is a little bit open to this side if, for example, they mine up, but you can very easily shoot down from the sides from here, for example, if they're pushing, and it can be very strong. Putting sandbags on any of these sides here can be very useful for defending. However, that's not the main power of this. And the reason for that is this building right here. The first thing I usually like to doing is doing a barbed wire right here just to make it a little bit harder to get in. You can also put a palisade here. Same reason, just makes it a little bit harder to get in the building. But the main reason why this is so strong is this upstairs area right here. Because of how wall pens work, this balcony actually saves you a lot. Because you can wall pen it, shooting opponents, but they cannot shoot you back because of how range works. If they're shooting from too far away, this balcony, this fence here basically will block a lot of those shots. To be a little bit more safe, I also do like putting a sandbag up here, and sometimes also a palisade up here, because sometimes they mine up to this position to try to shoot you, but this can be extremely useful. Lastly, you can get on the very top here by putting a palisade there and jumping up. This isn't that useful, however. It's just not necessary. It can be sometimes useful if you're, for example, using Volk, but it's just usually not necessary, and this basically balcony area is usually good enough. Next up, we have this point. I honestly don't know how to pronounce this word, so I almost always call this crematorium, because yeah. Anyways, this point is extremely good for Rook. First of all, it has extremely dumb wall pens for various areas. For example, these little sides here. They're kind of funny, actually. Anyways, so there's a pretty few good spots I like building here, which are pretty effective. First of all, this little spot right here in this corner, very nice hiding spot here because of this stone pillar. A lot of shots might hit the stone pillar, but this palisade provides just a little bit of extra defense. Pretty nice. Now, the true strength of this control point comes from the second floor. This second floor is very good for a few reasons. The first thing I like doing is putting some barricades on these staircases. It just prevents people from getting up very easily. Simple as that. It just makes our life a little bit harder. Now, the next thing I usually do, and this depends on what side the enemy is attacking from. So, for example, we're going to take this example. Let's say this enemy is attacking from this side over here. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to come to this side and build barricades here. Now, the reason you want to do this is for one reason only. The enemy really likes getting up on that third floor up there. And this second floor is very open to being shot from that third floor, and it can be a little bit difficult to shoot back. So by having these barricades here, it's much easier to defend this second floor and be able to defend the bottom floor basically by just staying up here, being very hard to punish. The main issue with this is you can be penned through the floor, so do keep in mind in that if there's an officer, for example, which can make you being very easy to spot. Okay, next up, radio. This point's weird, primarily because it's very small. The only good spot for a Rook in general is going to be up on this balcony here, where you can put sandbags and palisades to provide actually pretty decent defense. But due to how small it is, defense is pretty difficult on this point, as being able to hide in this building, as you can very easily get in this building or this building and hide in it, and you're not really like shootable from here. You have to drop down, and that leaves you very open. So this point can be pretty weird. It also very depends on what side the enemy is attacking from. For example, you can get up here, which can be decent if, for example, the opponent's attacking from this side, but is completely useless if they're attacking from this side. It really depends on what position you're attacking and defending from, and just in general, if your teammates can actually defend these bottom rooms. Because if they can defend these bottom rooms, then you can stay up here just shooting people for free. But if they can't, it's extremely difficult to control this point. So it's pretty in the middle in terms of score and can be kind of iffy at times, but not too bad if your team can actually play the game. Next up, Depot. I also call this one Tank for obvious reasons, but this control point is good for one main reason, and that's for this second floor. This second floor is actually ridiculous for several reasons. First of all, this whole section can be completely blocked off with barbed wire. You can put one right here, put one right here to stop them from jumping over, and then another one right here. Genuinely, this is bullshit. Like, as an enemy, you just can't do anything about this. And if you try to get up, the Rook will just shoot you. Second of all, you can put extra sandbags here, making this extremely defensible. No matter what side the opponent's really attacking from, this upstairs area is really, really strong. The only two ways to get up here are going to be these two ladders, which are very slow. There is a third kind of secret way to get up by getting on this little edge here and jumping up, which is extremely inconsistent and not really worth your time. And if anyone tries to do it, you just, you know, shoot them and they kind of just die. So it doesn't really matter. Second area I like going into is this bottom building here, which can be actually pretty good, as you can build palisades inside here to basically block off this entire room. Line it up. And so this entire room now is completely blocked off. And so you can basically have this room as your own little hideout almost. Obviously, it's probably not a good idea to block off both these entrances, but like blocking off this one entrance and then having this one open to be able to just, you know, shoot to the side, very effective. And being able to get in here is pretty hard. There's a funny secret spot I sometimes like using, which is right here. You go in first person, and most people don't expect you to be even up here, so it's kind of funny. Okay, I'm gonna say this straight up. Estate, or as I call it, bridge, is the worst point in this game. This point is actually awful for several reasons. First of all, 90% of it is made of the fucking stone material you can't penetrate, which is very cool. But there's one reason this point sucks. And that's because, unlike every other point in the game, which do have like their bad side and their good side. Basically meaning, if you have the good side, you do have a bit of an advantage towards your opponent, because you just have a bit of a better position that you can get to a bit easier. Estate takes that to the extreme, with the bridge side here being the good side, because you can go up here, hide in this little angle, and you are fucking unkillable. Just literally unkillable. If you're up here with a Volk, you are unkillable, and your opponent can do nothing about it. Nothing. You just can't do anything. You're up here and you can't do anything. Now, this point is only a 2 out of 10 and not a 1 out of 10, because as a rook, there is actually several good positions you can be. This upstairs area is actually quite strong. You can build palisades here and a barricade here to basically make this a completely closed off room, which is super useful for defense. You know, put a cache over here, and now you have a whole little room here you can just defend, which is super nice. But this whole control point really depends on what side your team has for spawn on. And if you get this side, you're fucked. And if you get this side, you win. Like, just genuinely. If this is the B point for your 3 CP, whatever's team gets this side is going to win. It just straight up. Legitimately. This side is genuinely so overpowered. The one other funny thing about this point is you can get on this roof pretty easily by just jumping, which I missed. Maybe it's not that easy, but maybe I have a skill issue. There we go, like so. This roof is not nearly as good as that one over there, but yeah, this point sucks. It is the worst point in this game and is genuinely awful to fight on for several reasons, as I just explained. Next up, the green of the house. Unlike Estate, this is actually a 1 out of 10. Yeah, this point is really bad for Rook. Please avoid if possible. There is really not much you can do here. It's super small. This whole building is basically off limits as a Rook. There's just not much you can do as it. The only spot you can really build on is up on this roof here, where you can do some barricades and some sandbags, and it can be kind of okay. But even then, it's really not. Please avoid this control point if you can. If you're a Rook, it's just really bad. There's just not much you can do here, to be completely frank. Hideout, or flat point, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be funny, because we're going to be going from greenhouse, one of Rook's worst points, to hideout, one of Rook's best points. Hideout is extremely similar to collapsed points, but it's already mined out for you, which is pretty nice. Really, all you have to do is go to the side, which is opposite where your enemy is. So, for example, look at the compass. Our side over there. So that means enemies are going to come over there. So we just build some barricades, like so. And what happens now is your opponent has to deal with this entire flat area with no cover while you have cover. You can kind of see why that's really strong. Okay, next up we have Manor. This building is just above average, primarily because the only useful part is this big building over here. More specifically, the second floor. This second floor is actually pretty damn good, being able to basically cover this entire area over here, but still be defensible to this downward area due to this trapdoor and due to being able to go up on this roof over here. I would highly suggest, however, building a barricade right here. This is primarily because one of the bigger counters to this is going up on this side wall and basically sniping you. So by building these walls here, it's much harder to do that. Another bigger counter is actually jumping, trying to get on top of this roof area. So I would highly suggest building a few things on this second floor, such as palisades in these doorways to make it a little bit harder to get in. Another barricade down here to basically close off these two windows over here. Another good spot are for some barbed wire on these windowsills. Lots of people like going in these windowsills, so blocking them off or making them a bit harder to get in is also a good idea. Jaegers can do much the same, although Jaegers plus Rook is very strong, so keep that in mind. Finally, this building over here is okay. It's not nearly as good as the second floor over there, but in a pinch, especially if, for example, the enemy has control of that second floor already, this can be not too bad, as you can block off these doorways and build some sandbags in here to make a pretty defensible position to be able to hold the capture or to help push onto the control point in the first place. So overall, not too bad. Remember when I said Hideout was one of Rook's best points? Well, 2 Fort, or Manufacturing as it's actually known, is Rook's actual best point. This point is actually ridiculous for Rook for several reasons. The first one is that you can actually capture this point on the second floor here. It's pretty easy to tell when you do that, but because of that, staying up on the second floor is extremely powerful. I specifically like this position with this upward stairwell facing the bridge over here. You can build a palisade, so not palisade, you can build a sandbag right here. A palisade here, and a palisade over here like so. This position is ridiculously powerful, giving you angles to this side over here, to this whole side over here, and defensive position if, for example, someone is actually able to get upstairs. Now, there is actually one reason why this control point is so good for Rook, and that's because you can get on the roof extremely easily. Normally, to get on the roof, you have to mine all the way up to get on, which is not only obvious, but very audible. This, on the other hand, is not. And you can very easily get up here to both defend and or attack, depending on what situation you're in. This point is genuinely overpowered for Rook, and I would highly suggest getting some build ideas on this control point, because it is really, really good. Oh, I messed up my jump. Next up, medical. The hospital, it is pretty shanty looking. Anyways, this point's not too bad for Rook. There's a couple pretty good positions. The main one is being able to get up here through that little climb up there and being able to basically use this upstairs area as a pretty good defensive position. It is, however, pretty naturally open, so even with Rook constructs, it's pretty hard to defend, especially if some people get up on this side. But if, for example, the enemy is coming from this side from over there, this position is very good because you can use these natural sandbags to your advantage very hard. So this upstairs area, unfortunately, is not that good due to the very claustrophobic nature of it, so I would highly suggest trying to avoid that as much as possible. The other area I like using is down here. You can very easily build a pretty defensible position in this little corner over here by basically building multiple different sandbags. And the final one will go right here, like so. This position is very defensible and can be very hard to push if, for example, the opponent is coming from that side over there. There's some very cheeky angles, like right here, where you're defended by both sandbags, which is pretty funny. And obviously, these natural boxes provide some pretty good defense overall. Overall, this point's not too bad, although you do have to be careful of this open area over here, and especially if the enemy is attacking from this side over here, as they have multiple different ways to get up onto the roof very easily, such as mining up to this balcony up there, or the very obvious staircase. So keep that in mind when defending. Next up, we have Mortuary, or I call it Graveyard. It's insane to me how a point can be so small and yet so open. This point is tied for greenhouse as by far Rook's worst, although it's not as bad of a point as estate is. Your really only option is inside this building here, where you can do 2 barricades, one on either side, very similar to Barracks, I might mention. The only difference to Barracks is the rest of this point sucks. These walls are all open. This roof is awful because you cannot pen it, meaning if anyone's on that roof, you just can't do anything at all. The roof access is extremely easy with 3 different ways to get up, 2 different ladders, as well as this little jump up right here. Honestly, even with those barricades inside there, this point is really, really, really bad for Rook. I would highly suggest trying to avoid this one if you can. The roof is okay and is really the only good option if you're not going to try to build down there. But I would highly suggest, even if on this roof, that you don't really waste your constructs on it. It's just not worth it. This one spot's okay, I like. It's the only spot I've found that's actually decent, but other than this, nothing else really works. To be frank, this point is pretty bad. Very similar to Greenhouse in that regard. This point can be pretty good, but it really depends on what side the enemy is coming from. For example, if the enemy is coming from that side over there, where that big building is, you can very easily get on this building with a sandbag and snipe people. It's actually pretty good. But you do have to worry about the low ceiling. It's similar to both Barracks and 2 Forts, and even Hightower in a way. But because of the low ceiling, it makes being able to do drop downs from the roof very easily for the enemy to do. The rest of this roof is also not too bad, although because it's accessible by all people, it's not the best. Lastly, this inside building is okay, but these doorways are unfortunately just big enough to not be fully covered by a palisade, so you can't really rely on that. And building barricades in here is not reliable due to the bad angles that it creates, so really the only option is being on the roof. Now, despite that, the roof is still quite strong, as you can probably imagine, being able to build sandbags up here or palisades to basically give your team a pretty big advantage. The last spot I want to talk about is actually on top of these boxes right here, which can be pretty funny, as you can basically make a little bit of a wall for yourself with palisade on one side, box on the other side. It can be pretty funny, actually. Very defensible and not too bad, actually. Next up, we have Outpost. This point's actually not too bad. There's a few pretty decent spots. The first one is in this middle area. Now, depending on what side the opponent is attacking from. So, for example, if the opponent is attacking from this side, what I often do is I will block off this doorway here, put a palisade right here, as wall pens through these walls can be pretty annoying. And then now you have this very defensible box that they can only get in from one side, which surprisingly, you're defending. So, not too bad actually. You have access to the cache, you can put palisades on all the walls for more defense, and if there's a Jaeger, they can even put traps on these palisades to make it even harder to get in. The other area I like using is inside this L-shaped building. Palisades are just short enough to be able to fit inside here, creating some pretty cool spaces you can use. For example, palisade here, palisade right here, provides a pretty decent corner to hide in, especially if the enemy is coming from that side. Barbed wire is also super nice, as it can be paired with Jaeger traps to basically make these windows completely off limits, which is super useful. And as always, I like putting palisades in these doorways, as it just prevents people from getting in. Simple as that. The main issue with this control point, though, is the height, actually. Because of this tall building, the height of the outpost, especially the roof, is really tall. Now, why is that a problem? Well, it's because of one specific strategy. By mining up to these sides here, you can very easily mine a little position for yourself, get out your Volk, and snipe people. It's so easy, in fact, that if you get this control point on attack defend, for example, and you're on defense, by just getting up here with a sniper, it becomes extremely hard for the enemy to push. So that's really the only main annoyance about this control point. But because of the buildings you can just stay in to avoid this sniping, it's not too bad if you know how to deal with it. Next up we have processing. This point is actually pretty damn good for Rook. There's two areas you're going to want to focus on if you're going to be defending. And that's this bottom area in this main building or the upstairs area. And we'll start with the bottom area. Beside this ladder, you can create a pretty decent defense actually by using your palisades, specifically the barricades, which, barricades here. You can provide some pretty damn good, basically, defense. Because this area is so open, just putting some few walls here makes it way more defensible for your team, and your team can basically use this as a staging area to basically defend the rest of the point. The other part you're going to want to keep in mind is this upstairs area here for several reasons. First of all is this main area with the drop down. Main parts you're going to have to worry about are these staircases right here, which often Jaegers will put traps on, which will be pretty useful to take into mind. But what you can do is to influence where people go, so you can block off both of these sides here to make it a little bit harder. More specifically, this one over here, because this side can be a little bit annoying if people try to go through it. One of the biggest issues is actually people getting on the roof, which is very common on this control point, and dropping down basically through these elevator shafts. What you can do to somewhat prevent it, or at least stall them a little bit, is by putting some barricades on both of these sides. This makes it just a little bit harder to drop down and makes them have to think about it a little bit more, either by going through one of the many windows on this point, which is surprisingly is a very open upstairs, which is pretty nice. The one main downside to this upstairs area is you don't capture the point, which does make sense. It would be a little bit strong if you could do that. So you do want to have some defenses down here, like I said, over here, because it is at the end of the day where you're going to want to be if the enemy is attacking. You want to have a split of some people upstairs and some people downstairs, but the downstairs is obviously more important because if you only have control of the upstairs, you're going to lose the control. You're going to lose the points. So you really do want to have some stuff down here. Okay, next up we have Renewal. This point is pretty tough to fight on, and that's for one pretty big reason. These walls are a bit thick, just a little bit. They are almost impossible to wall penetrate through unless you're at very specific angles, but even then it's not the best. Wall pens being as important as they are in this game, this is a pretty big downside that you have to take into consideration when playing on this point. The inside of these buildings is actually not too bad. I like this spot over here next to these basically big ass barrels. By putting some palisades beside those, they can provide natural defense, and because you can shoot through them at people coming towards you, it can actually be pretty damn useful. There is roof access on this control point, although it's not the most useful. The main one I like using to get on top is to use this spot right here, which can provide a short little boost to be able to get up. The other spot that you can use to get up is on the opposite side, where these big barrels are. They're not as effective though, as you can't really get up without using a palisade. So you do have to use 2 palisades to get up here, which does come into play if you miss your jump. So if you do want to get on the roof, use the other side. But unfortunately, the roof on this control point is not the best due to the bad angles that it has. And I would generally advise to not get up here in most situations. Overall, this point is pretty annoying because of the no wall pens, as the only gun that can do so is the Judgment, and we all know how that works. Next up we have Sabbath. I usually call this one Cathedral because it's like big church. So, this point's pretty bad. It's super open no matter where you go, so even if you do build things, it can be pretty bad. This inside area is okay, but it's just so open. There's like so many ways to get in. It's just not the best. The upstairs area is also not the best, as even if you're not the Rook, there is like 6 different ways to get up here. The 3 ladders and being able to mine up and get on the sides here is super easy. Lastly, this little building over here can be somewhat okay, especially if you need to defend. It's a bit smaller and as such is actually not too bad for Rook, as you can build some stuff in here and make it pretty defensible, as you can completely block off this side with a palisade. You can do a little bit of a squish, but it's much better than the alternative of trying to fight over there. So I'd highly suggest using this building if you can, as you still capture the point over here. So, and that's pretty much it for this point. Next up, we have Shanty. This control point is extremely good for Rook. Almost as good as manufacturing or 2 fort, with a few downsides, but those downsides are so minor it doesn't even make a difference. The main area I like building is right next to this banner. I like putting a palisade right here and a palisade right here. This spot becomes extremely defensible, as you can stand on these sandbags here and to basically see over and know when to jump over and shoot. Super useful. The roof is also very accessible with palisades, being able to quickly build one up here and jump up here. This roof access is super useful, as you could very easily put more defenses up here to create even more advantages for yourself. Small tech that you can do is you can actually jump across the other side by going across those little beams, so you don't have to do a second palisade if you don't need to. Next is barbed wire. You can very easily put barbed wire on these staircases here, very easily preventing people from getting in. Surprisingly, this is extremely hard to get through, and if people try to jump over, which they can jump over this spot here, they are much more open because they cannot shoot back because they're in the jumping animation. You as the Rook, however, can completely avoid it by building basically your own pathway, which at this point in the video you should understand that using palisades to get up to high places is extremely powerful. The last spot that you might want to know is in this cache room. This cache room is actually pretty damn good. I'd highly suggest putting palisades and or barricades there to prevent wall penetrations, but you can very easily create like a little bit of a hold inside this little building here, which can be super useful. Like this. So for example, if the enemy is attacking from this side, being on this bottom floor here can be very defensible. Overall, easily one of, if not the second best, because 2 fort is the best by far, but easily the second best control point for Rook. So if you can, please learn how to play on this one. Next up, we have Warehouse. Or actually, this one's called Stockpile. I always confuse them. If you do too, then yeah, I've been playing this game for a long time. I always confuse them. This point's pretty good for a few reasons. We'll go over those. So the funny thing is these hallways are just large enough for palisades to fit in them. And so what I often like to do if I'm fighting on this bottom floor is building palisades basically to influence where the opponent is going to move to. Because a lot of people don't know you can jump over them. So they're basically a wall that prevents them. And even if they do jump over them, if, for example, you're defending here, you could very easily shoot back when they can't. Because, like I said, they're in the jumping animation. So basically, by building palisades in spots to basically provide physical barriers that they cannot jump through is super useful. The main issue is the upstairs area. This upstairs area is quite powerful. We'll go up there and have a look. Now, normally, to get up here, you have to use these very slow ladders. You don't have to do that as Rook, because you can completely avoid the ladders. So that's something nice to keep in mind. But when up here, there's one spot that I like going to if you are Rook. Generally, this upstairs area is quite strong, but there's one area that I do like a bit more, which is specifically this spot right here, right in the middle on this island. This island's actually pretty good. Put a palisade there, and now you have a very good angle on a lot of sides, but it's still naturally defensible because of these natural barricades here. I would also suggest putting a palisade on this side as well, because you can get shot from this angle over here. Next up, we have Stockpile. Oh my god, that's not correct. Fuck. Okay, next up we have Transmission. This point is a bit weird because it is basically three lanes. This middle lane, which is completely open, and then 2 side lanes with the buildings. The main building you're going to be focusing on is this one, the one with the big tower on it. Now, I wouldn't use a tower, it's not that good, it really isn't. What I would use, and what I usually like using, is this little pillar right here. by building a palisade here, completely blocking off this doorway, and then building another, usually sandbag a little bit further forward, and create this very defensible corner, which can be very hard to push, for example, if the enemy's on that side. It does depend if the enemy's on that side, because if they're on this side, I wouldn't use this corner. I would use the other side. But the other side, for example, has something much better. So, that side I would use if the enemy is attacking from this side. But if the enemy is attacking from that side, then I would go up here and build stuff up here. You can very, very, very easily put sandbags and palisades up here to create a very, very, very defensible position from this side. The one thing you have to worry about is this has a very similar downside to Outpost, where you can very easily get on the walls due to the high ceiling and use Volk to snipe people, which can be very, very annoying to deal with. But overall, this point's not too bad for Rook, especially if you know where to build, which hopefully now that you do. I do, like I said, be careful of sniping positions, and be careful because even as a Rook, these downstairs areas are really, really open. Like, this is a completely open hallway if there's no constructs. This is a completely open area where you can get sniped really easily. Overall, this point is sniper heaven. Very similar to Outpost, but a little bit worse than Outpost, because unlike Outpost, which has the really low ceilings, this doesn't. Okay, for our final point of the video, we have Warehouse. This point is pretty funny, as there's quite a few funny spots that you can take advantage of. The first and most obvious one is up here. By taking this ladder, you get up to this pretty funny spot. And it is extremely, extremely defendable. Sandbag in this little spot here to obviously the usual angles, but you could put palisades in these windows, basically prevent people from dropping down and getting in the windows, which is very common. But more funnily enough is yeah, kind of dumb. Now no one can get up, and now basically you're up here with your own little cache in your own little world, basically, and there's not much an opponent can do if you have like a Volk up here, and especially if you have some teammates up here. It's very, very strong. There is one downside to this, and is if an opponent Rook actually knows what they're doing, they can actually build a palisade here and jump up extremely easily. But don't tell people I told you that. The last very funny thing you can do on this point, which most people I don't think know, is by going up to this spot here. You can build a palisade right here, and I missed. You can build a palisade right here, and right here, and yeah, you can get on the roof. Most people don't know you can do that, which is very useful. For example, if they have this side where that's where the staircase is, as you probably know, so you can get on the roof very easily to prevent them from dropping down and surprising people. Do keep in mind you have to build it in the direction of where this little trapdoor is, because if you build it the opposite way, it does not work, which I will showcase right now. So I build it in the opposite way, you cannot jump up. Because of how this trapdoor works, it lets you do that little jump animation, or the climb animation, I should say. And there we go. This is the final point of the video. Post-commentary catcher here. Thanks for watching the full video. If you did get this far, then if you wouldn't mind, like and subscribe. This is by no means the definitive rulebook for how to build on control points, but more of a guidebook. And of course, if you have your own suggestions and tips for how to do so, please leave them in the comments below. I will try to respond to as many as possible. And see you next time.